You are listening to The Brian Craig Show podcast, broadcasting from sunny South Florida. Brian is joined by his wife and co-host, Kathy. Follow Brian on social media at BrianCraigShow.com. And now, Brian and Kathy.
All right, on our celebrity hotline, we have one of our great senators here in Florida, Senator Marco Rubio. Senator Rubio, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, let me tell you, Senator, this race, everybody always says this is the most important election of our lifetime, but this Senate race between you and Val Demings is the most important Senate race of my lifetime, and I've lived in Florida my whole life.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a pretty stark difference, which I think, elections are always best when there's a clear difference between the two people that are running, and that's the case here. The first is I'm someone that's actually gotten very meaningful things done in over the last 6 years. In fact, I don't say it. The Center for Effective Lawmaking that the University of Virginia runs says it. The YouGov says it. I'm the most effective Republican senator in getting things done, not just for Florida, but for the country. Val Demings has gotten nothing done. She's been in Congress for 6 years. She sort of ignores the fact that she's a member of Congress. She's been there for 6 years. Her party's been in charge of the House for 4 of those 6 years. The president for her party's been in charge for the last 2. She's never passed a bill. She's never done anything.
In 6 years?
The second year. In 6 years, she's never passed anything or even tried to pass anything. I've passed more bills this year with Democrats in charge than she has in her entire career in Washington. The second thing that's a big difference is she's a rubber stamp for Pelosi. She votes with Pelosi 100% of the time. That's why Schumer wants her in the Senate. And look, I don't vote with McConnell 100% of the time. We just did burn pit legislation as an example, and I broke from many people in our party because I thought our veterans deserved that. Those who've been exposed to toxic burn pits deserve care from the VA. So she votes with Pelosi 100%. She's a rubber stamp for this radical agenda. So that's a big difference between an ineffective person who's also a rubber stamp and someone like me who gets things done and votes based on common sense and the best interest of the state and country.
Well, I'll tell you, a great example of that is in the news this week. Val Demings has come out in favor of this student loan bailout of Biden's.
Yeah, so 85% of Americans don't have a student loan, and they're going to have to pay for everybody else that does. So think about it this way. Okay, imagine if you're someone who didn't go to college. Instead, you took out a loan and bought a bunch of, bought equipment and tools and opened up your own plumbing company. Okay, and you now have to fight with the IRS about whether you can deduct some of that off your taxes, but no one's going to pay off that loan for you.
That's right.
No one's going to forgive that loan, and you've actually created jobs for people and the like. And then someone else decides, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get a degree, or maybe I don't even graduate, and the degree doesn't lead to a job, but I borrowed money to pay for it, and now I want you guys to come in and bail me out. So we treat the person that started that business terribly in our tax code, and no forgiveness for the loan they had to take out in order to start that business and create jobs. But on the other hand, someone who borrowed the money gets forgiven. And look, I had student loans, okay? I have over $170,000 in student loans. I'm not saying we don't have a student loan problem. I'm saying, and I've been trying to fix it for years, I'm saying forgiving and writing off student loans the way they've done is an unfair wealth transfer. It's unfair. It's not right. It's not the right approach to this.
Yeah, and so many of us worked our way through college, and sometimes I took one class a semester when I was paying my own way through college. It's outrageous.
Yeah, look, I've had all kinds of proposals about getting rid of the interest rate and just charging a flat fee. I don't know why we're charging interest on these loans. I've had proposals called Right to Know Before You Go. It's bipartisan, and it just means before you take out a loan, they have to tell you how much people make when they graduate from that school with that degree, so you can decide whether that's really a good major to borrow money for. I mean, there's things that we can do to fix this, but just to write off loans for all, I mean, it's just, what if you just finished paying off your loans? You should have just not paid them and waited a couple of years and gotten this. What if, and by the way, people are taking out loans right now. Like, school just started, so people are now taking out loans as they're going back to college and universities and grad school. Theirs are not going to be forgiven. So the only people that are being forgiven are the ones from the past who haven't paid off their loans, not the ones in the future, and not the ones who worked hard and sacrificed for years to pay off their loans.
Well, one thing, Senator Marco Rubio, by the way, is our honored guest. Senator Rubio, one thing about Val Demings that I've noticed in her television ads, she doesn't say she's a Democrat, and she really looks as if she's trying to pass herself off as a tough-on-crime Republican.
Yeah, she doesn't say two things. One, she doesn't say she's a Democrat, right? She doesn't want you to know that. No. And the other thing she doesn't tell you is that she's a member of Congress. That she was a police chief a long time ago before she went to Washington and turned against the police. That's why they've all endorsed me. But if you look back at it, okay, she ran for mayor of Orlando and dropped out of the race, didn't even make it to election day. Then she wanted to be the lieutenant governor pick for Charlie Crist when he ran for governor, I guess, the third time or second time in 2014. Then she ran for Congress and lost. Then she ran for Congress and won. Then she wanted to be Biden's vice president. Then she wanted to run for governor at one time, but then changed her mind and decided to run for Senate. So she spent like 12 years chasing politics, and she doesn't want you to know that either. And then, as I said, she calls herself Chief Demings. She doesn't want you to know she's a member of Congress who, when she's not proxy voting, meaning remote voting, she's there she's a rubber stamp for Nancy Pelosi. She votes 100% of the time. If Nancy Pelosi was a congressperson from Florida, that's how she would vote.
Including being part of the impeachment team against President Trump and voting to impeach President Trump. Now, one thing that she's talked about in her television ads is that she's tough on crime. But my recollection is she was part of this defund the police movement.
She called it very thoughtful when Minneapolis was talking about doing it. She called the riots a beautiful sight. Look, I think, 56, 57, 58 sheriffs here in Florida of the 66 that are elected endorse me. The FOP endorsed me. The PBA endorsed me. The Chiefs of Police Association endorsed me. The Sheriff's Association endorsed me. And the reason is that in 2020, when they were burning down streets in America and attacking police officers, and Val Demings was trying to get picked as Biden's vice president, she criticized the police. She didn't side with the police or defend the police. She said that policing had a problem, an endemic problem in America. America had failed. She said what Minneapolis was doing to defund the police and to replace them with counselors was very thoughtful. So they don't forget that. And then on top of everything else, she's out there lending, what was at the time the credibility of being a former police officer and saying, oh, it's okay. We should pass a bill to sue police officers. Oh. So you could actually sue individual police officers.
Wow.
And so that's why all the major law enforcement groups in Florida support me, because what she's done is even worse. One thing is to never have been a police officer and not know any better because you're just a crazy leftist. But another thing is to go along with that stuff when you should know better. It's even worse because the left used to hide right behind her. They used to say, well, look, Val Demings used to be a police officer and she agrees with us. Yeah. The police is out of control. When they needed her, she wasn't there.
Yeah, we're speaking with Senator Marco Rubio, who needs your vote in November. And you've got my vote and the vote of everyone in my family, including my daughter, Senator. Now, I'll tell you, Val Demings, thank you. Every time I turn on television, including Fox News, I'm seeing a television commercial for Val Demings. The Democrats have put everything in this race.
Yeah, they've raised a lot of money from around the country. Most of it's not from Florida. The vast majority of it, is coming from California and New York. The liberal places that hate the state and want to ruin it. Really, I mean, it's the same reason why the governor, of California is down here spending money against Governor DeSantis, right? Because they hate Florida and Florida's embarrassed them. They're losing population to Florida. So she's raised a lot of money from those groups. So obviously, look, if people are listening and can be of any assistance to us, we need your help. We don't have to, this is not a fundraising competition, but we do have to have the money to run our own ads. And we're starting to do a lot more of that now, but we need your help. So, my website is the easiest way to do it, marcorubio.com. Any amount helps. Honestly, it does. And whatever people can do to help, it's important because we want to get our message out, not just about what I've done, but the differences, the choice between what she would do as the Senate, what I've done and will continue to do if I'm reelected.
Well, if she does twice in the Senate what she's done in the House, that means zero. Now, I want to ask you about one last thing, Senator Rubio. And this is pretty troubling, and I think it will be troubling to a lot of people listening. Val Demings has a 100% rating from Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, which means basically she supports taxpayer-funded on abortion on demand at any time up to the moment of birth.
Wow.
So she was asked this weekend, tell us what abortions you would not make legal. At what point should it not be legal? And she would refuse to answer. She said, viability, but she wouldn't describe what that meant. Basically, it's whenever the doctor and the patient decides. The reason is you can't have a 100% rating, not just from Planned Parenthood, but from NARAL, the other radical group. Yeah. You can't have a 100% rating from them unless you're in favor of not just abortion on demand at any time, like literally up to the day right before the child is born or scheduled to be born or due, but have taxpayers pay for it. That's her position. And that, the media never asks about that. They always ask, well, what exceptions? I've always said, look, I'll support bills that have exceptions because I want to save innocent life. And but they never ask them, well, what kinds of abortions should not be legal? Should partial birth? Should 36 weeks? Should 39 weeks? In Florida, it's a 4-month thing. I mean, you're talking about a 4-month after 4 months. That's the law in the state of Florida, and that's where those decisions belong. That's what the Supreme Court rules. But she has a very radical position of basically on demand, paid for by taxpayers at any time in the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Now, one last question, Senator Rubio. When people go and vote on Election Day, when they go to vote for you, what should they think in regards to you and why you should earn their vote?
Number one, because whether they agree with me on every issue or not, I get important things done that are good for them and for the state and for the country. The PPP program that saved millions of small business and small business jobs. The VA accountability bill, one of the first bills President Trump signed. The increase in the real child tax credit in 2017. I did that almost single-handedly, frankly. The bills that got me sanctioned by China because of Hong Kong and Uyghur Muslim slaves and the import of products from there. Ranked number one in the country in award for constituent service for solving people's problems. People call my office, they need help with the VA or their passport expired and their cruise leaves on Friday, and we help them with that. So I get things done. And I also get things done that are based on common sense. You never hear me associated with some crazy radical thing that violates common sense. I believe the federal government should do a few important things, and the vast majority of our power should be, if it is government power, it should be in the hands of local and state governments. And I'm running against someone who's a puppet of Nancy Pelosi, just votes 100% like Nancy Pelosi, and has never done anything in 6 years in Congress except vote with Nancy Pelosi. I think that's a pretty stark choice.
Senator Marco Rubio, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.